to tell you there's another committee meeting in this room at 9 o'clock, and I would love to get as much of this agenda completed today, if at all possible here. So what I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna call up the first bill, which is Senate Bill 2078. And what this bill does is it extends a repealer on the State Board of Funeral Services. That repealer is in line 1339. It repeals and extends that until July 1 of 2029. Are there any questions on the bill? There's a motion of title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. The second bill is Senate Bill 2079, public contracts for energy efficiency services, extend the repealer on. This was a new one to me, so I wanted to look into it so that you would know what this bill basically does. So this statute gives the Energy Division of MDA the ability to oversee the energy service contracts of government authorities. The entity then reports energy usage and fuel consumption so that we can find out if some of the equipment, perhaps air conditions, things like that, are efficient, or at time of upgrade, there could be a cost savings to the state by using something more efficient. So it's not a program of buying things or anything like that. It's just a method of efficiency. So I wanted to make that clear. So the bill itself extends a repealer to 2029 on line 269. Are there any questions on this bill? Thank you. There's motion of title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. The next bill is Senate Bill 2080, telework policies, extend the repealer on. And there's been some conversation on this over the years. We set up a telework policy, and I believe it went through my committee when I had a previous chairmanship. And then we changed this again 2 years ago, and we made it a lot more not restrictive, but defined. And so what this does is, for there to be a telework policy, it has to be in the best interest of those who are suggesting it. Information has to be sent to the personnel board. There has to be agreement between the employee, delineating the duties and things that will be done in the telework situation. The names are reported. There's excellent record keeping on this, and this is fairly limited. What I didn't want to do is extend this too long. This simply extends this for 2 years as we continue to look and try to make decisions on, whether or not we need a telework policy at all going forward. So this just keeps this limited telework policy in effect for 2 more years. So any questions? Senator Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know how many of our employees are teleworking right now?
There's probably someone in the room who can get us that information. I don't know the number offhand. I'm sure Allison could maybe help me find the information. I'll try to know before we get to the floor.
Thank you.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a kind of along the same lines as Senator Blackwell. I know that COVID, we ramped up a lot of telework was going on, but isn't the spirit and the attitude kind of to bring people back into the offices, and we're trying to move in that direction? As I've gone around, I kind of see agencies trying to move there.
Yeah, we are, and the example that comes to me when we made this change 2 years ago, we do have people, for example, at DEQ in the engineering field who are doing multiple things, and their computers and things that they use in the telework arena are actually, from an IT standpoint, a little bit more efficient and robust for some of their engineering duties and things like that. So I believe it was DEQ in particular that needed this to continue. I didn't want to just bring this up as just a repealer bill and say, hey, we need to extend this. I do think we need to continue to look at this and make the best decisions. So I'll try to find, with help of counsel before we bring this on the floor, some more examples of who might need this and maybe who doesn't. And if you find some instances out there of people that you feel are using telework right now that we maybe need to rein in, I would be happy to entertain that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Title sufficient do pass.
Motion is title sufficient do pass. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. The next bill, Senate Bill 2377, has to do with public procurement with the PPRB Board. I'm going to go ahead and ask my co-chair to make a motion to add a reverse repealer to this bill to just get started.
To add the reverse repealer.
There's a motion. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll add that, and I'll give you the reasoning for that. This is going to give a good bit more scrutiny and oversight to the PPRB Board. I've already had some people expressing some concerns about that. I want to hear those concerns. I want to find out what those concerns are. But what the bill does, starting in lines 381 through 443. Bear with me while I flip to it here. It adds to the PPRB responsibilities the ability to reject the approval of a contract, procurement, or lease agreement that is determined to be not financially viable, non-compliant with state law, involving a conflict of interest, lacking adequate justification, deficient in clearly defined deliverables, awarded to vendors without the necessary qualifications, excessive in cost, lacking sufficient safeguards, submitted with incomplete, inaccurate, or misleading documentation. It goes on to allow the PPRB Board to issue written statements specifying the reasons for rejecting a contract. And under the emergency contracts, it allows emergency contracts that they may be approved without standard competitive bids. That's already what we've kind of been doing. However, these contracts must now, in this language, clearly document the nature of the emergency, demonstrate reasonable cost considerations, and be subject to retroactive review. So again, this is a transparency measure. What we try to do in situations like this is we try to balance the need for procurement in a timely manner, but we also try to safeguard the state's money and make sure that we are finding some of these procurements to be appropriate. I've had the opportunity to sit in on a couple of board meetings, and I do believe there are some procurements that maybe need just a few more questions. So I look forward to feedback from people and stakeholders in this arena as we move this along. So again, putting the reverse repealer in allows us to continue the conversation. So for questions, Senator Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a lot of language, a lot of things are added to that. And I think based on your description, it sounds pretty good, but I'm curious as to where it all came from. Is this from some other states' statutes that deal with procurement boards?
This is actually from feedback from the PPRB board. You know, they gave council some problems and, you know, things that they're seeing, you know, and council for our Senate put this together based on those things. So if there is a similarity to another statute, it wasn't intentional on my part, but I certainly, in drafting bills and looking at bills, I often go to other states to try to find best practices. And so it wouldn't surprise me if we see this language in another state.
Well, it's very, very detailed, which is probably good, but it takes a lot of time to digest all these changes, and this may be similar to what they're doing already in some respects. It's just codifying it. I
Right.
didn't know if there was a.
Yeah. And again, you know, when we met last year, you know, the charge of this committee being AET is additional education and thought. And so as this bill moves along, you are not going to hurt my feelings in one bit to express what additional education and thought you find out that we need to move into this. And, you know, because we want to make sure when we make a move like this, that we're safeguarding the interests of the state, but at the same time, not creating a burden that becomes cumbersome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion? We have a motion of title sufficient do pass as amended. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. We're going to jump now to the last bill on your kind of list here, Senate Bill 2847. Then we'll jump back in line after this. I wanted to bring this one up now because it kind of has similar accountability issues that we kind of went through on the previous bill. So for Senate Bill 2847, most of you already know this bill has gotten attention from the auditor's office since I introduced it last week. I want to be clear that this is my bill and it's based upon concerns that began for me on September 12th of last year. This bill was in drafting and was being framed well before last week's budget hearing with the state auditor. It is not a reaction bill to a meeting or to anything that happened last week, which has been characterized in a number of posts and other things that are out there on social media. The bill includes items of concern that were shared with me by both the Office of the Secretary of State and the Office of the Attorney General. The bill does not decrease audits or investigations. It increases the number of required audits by the state auditor and clears up ambiguity in the statute that has led to confusion. The bill also clearly defines the role of the Attorney General in prosecuting a lawsuit for unpaid demands that require such action. My concerns that came up on September 12th came from a press conference that I just happened to see on TV with our state auditor. So he made a trip up to DeSoto County and held a press conference arresting one of the aldermen from Horn Lake. The alderman was arrested for accepting unemployment insurance during COVID. And so the circumstance of that is the alderman was not employed during COVID and filed for unemployment and failed to list the fact that he was an alderman on the application. However that happened, I didn't file the application. I don't know how that happens. Alderman pay for Horn Lake is around $10,000 a year. So during the course, as I understand the facts now, the alderman realized the mistake and paid the money back. At the press conference, the alderman was arrested. His face and mugshot were put on the television and he was sent to jail. The following day, an attorney from Oxford, Steve Faris, came down and held another press conference. And at that press conference, he revealed that the former alderman had paid the money back. He'd been bailed out and that there had been some errors in this rush to judgment and rush to press conference. So what I did was I called MDES and I asked, has this gentleman paid this sum of money back? It took them a little while. They got back to me and they said that he had. And so with that information, I sent a text to the auditor and I have that text because I'm a very good record keeper. I keep everything. Those of you who know me, it's probably a flaw, but it's also an advantage at times. And I sent that to the auditor expressing my concerns over what had happened in this case. So as soon as the text went out, he immediately called me back. He said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, I have these concerns. We've had somebody who it appears, has been arrested, has had their face put on television, not on the posts that we get on, our emails all the time, but on television. And it seems to have been, maybe a race to prosecution." So I expressed those concerns. He immediately asked me, he said, "How did you get that information?" And I said, "I called MDES." And he told me that I could not call MDES. And I told him I can call MDES. He then asked me who I had spoken to at MDES. And I told him I was not going to tell him who I spoke to at MDES. And he said that I have to tell him who I spoke to at MDES because this is a federal investigation and I'm interfering with it. And I told him again, I'm not going to interfere, and I just have concerns that this gentleman who, in what I consider to be, fair method, had been able to pay something back, made a mistake, and had his life changed. He told me that this alderman is a criminal and he needs to be in jail. And I hung up on him, and that's the last time I spoke to our state auditor. So when someone makes a representation that the bills and the concerns that I have about the authority and the prosecutorial reaches of the auditor, and they want to attribute that to the lieutenant governor or attribute it to anybody else, I'll tell you, attribute it to me. I held my comments until today because I don't do legislation on social media. I do legislation in this room. And I will tell you, when we are put in jeopardy on issues, as senators and other people who understand the process, we are given the opportunity to reply and do other things. When blue collar people who are serving as an alderman have that happen, they're never able to run for office again, and their life has changed. I would guess, and again, I'll say this, I called back to MDS to get some more information, and I was told by MDS that a call had been made to MDS and they could no longer talk to me about the case. So I have no further information about this since then. But it's our duty to look out for and to stand up for the people who don't have the knowledge and the ability to come here and make a difference. And so there are a couple of changes to the auditor statute that I'm suggesting. If anybody after this meeting has questions about them, I'm going to ask you, don't run up to the lieutenant governor and ask him. I'm going to ask you to come to me and talk to me face to face. And if you have questions about a bill I introduced, before getting on Facebook and lambasting people about it, I ask you to call me and come to my office and talk to me. So that is my point on it. So I'll move into the bill itself and give you some of the background here. So the bill does two things. They're working with the Secretary of State's office. In the first section of the bill, it basically gives state agencies the a requirement that notice of certain consent decrees and revision of the provisions be related to, I'm sorry, I'm reading the title of the bill. Let me go to section 1. In section 1, it prohibits certain entities from entering into certain consent decrees or agreed judgments without prior written notification to the governor and the legislature. Again, this comes from the Secretary of State, and specifically in the bill, if you look on lines 31 through really kind of 37, if the settlement would require an expenditure of an amount that exceeds $1 million or would impact the administration of any election, then that would trigger the notice that a form produced by the Attorney General be delivered to the governor and lieutenant governor and the Speaker of the House on behalf of the legislature. I am at the end of this going to make an amendment to change the dollar amount after some of my conversations with the AG's office about this particular provision, but I'll get to that as we move a little bit further into the bill here. The second thing that it does is regarding the second section of the bill. The only changes that we have to the state auditor's office is in lines 128 through 138. It enhances the duties of the office of the state auditor by requiring a pre-audit and post-audit if a profit or nonprofit receives $10 million or more from public funds. At this time, the auditor can just do this at his discretion. This would make this a requirement for these large amounts and would increase oversight and increase more transparency in our government. I'm going to have a small amendment on this section 2 to increase the auditor's responsibilities in doing these audits, because I am very encouraged with the work that they have done. I think the auditor has done an excellent job at protecting the money of the state, and I want to give him or her, the ability to continue doing that. This is meant to hold these entities, requiring these to more scrutiny and to safeguard misappropriation of funds. The second change is on line 178. It removes the words, quote, "The state auditor shall have the authority and it shall be his duty to institute suit." This is going to create some clarification. This language is unique to this law and creates ambiguity. Removal ensures the statute uses more typical language familiar to the courts, So it is clear that the Attorney General has the authority to prosecute a lawsuit for an unpaid demand by the Office of the State Auditor. In looking into this, we have several states around the country that do things differently. Some of them give broad discretion to the Office of State Auditor to enter into these suits. Others require a little more collaboration. This collaboration would be between the Office of the State Auditor and the Attorney General. I spoke with the Attorney General to see if they could handle this role. They are ready, willing, and able to handle this role. And I also feel that if we have more collaboration, we can avoid mistakes where information regarding a case is not made present or prevalent before an arrest or a post is made on social media. The final thing that it does is on lines 239 through 265, when the auditor is relying on or contracting with an outside accounting firm, they shall conduct a financial statement audit, which is more robust than other audits. And the Office of State Auditor will have all working papers for the audit for review. What this does is if you came to my business and you asked to audit my business, and I printed out a simple profit and loss agreement, and I listed all of my revenue in and all my revenue out, that would give you, so example, in my field, I might have lab supplies, and it would have an amount for that. This is going to allow more robust, because in that situation, it would require more of a breakdown of what the lab supplies were. And so you would get maybe the monthly bill for what you spent on lab supplies in the reporting instead of just the overview. And this provides the Office of the State Auditor with more comprehensive audit documentation than current law and being able to analyze findings more appropriately. The amendments that I want to make, and if we could, I'd like to adopt these first before we move into discussion on the bill. The first amendments would be that in lines 33 and 43, where we have 1 million, I'd like to increase that up to 5 million. That is for the Secretary of State's portion of the bill. On line 134, I'd like to insert post-audit and after the word may. And then on line 135, following up on that, insert profit and in front of nonprofit, such that after this change there, I'll read it through for you here. It will say, or its subdivisions, and may post-audit and pre-audit profit and nonprofit business entities administering programs. There was some question about whether or not we should be doing this for profits, nonprofits. I want to make sure that the statute gives the auditors ability to have purview over both entities. So are there questions on the amendment? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the amendment? All in favor of the amendment say aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we're back on the bill. And before I close, I'll be glad to yield for any questions. Senator Blunt.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I need a little bit of clarification, not as it relates to the Department of Audit, but as it relates to the potential impact of this on the Public Records Act. And I'm looking specifically at lines 52 through 55. And if I'm a regulatory board, whatever it is I'm charged to regulate in the public interest, and I find somebody who is violating the law, and I have to take action against them and enter into an agreed judgment or a consent decree or a settlement of litigation for the fact that they broke the law. And I've documented all that and the danger that they present to the public and what they've done wrong. Under this bill, as I read it, before I do that, I have to notify the governor and the legislature that I'm about to do that. And then at that point, and I can send them every single thing involving the investigation of that case. And then at that point, all the records, documents, and information associated with that action are now exempt from the Public Records Act. And so I have a concern about that. I hear what you're saying about, I don't think this relates to the Department of Audit. I'm talking about any regulatory board of a profession or DEQ or DMR or Department of Health or anything that they do when they find a significant violation of law and they can assess civil penalties or they're forced to go sue somebody. And then before they do settle that case, they send a letter, they send all the documents associated with that case, and then all those documents are now exempt from the Public Records Act. Is that what we want to do?
So I have not given any serious thought to that, and you raise a very good and very valid question. That was language that was proposed to me by the Secretary of State's office. My suggestion might be on that. We could do one of two things. We could continue to move the bill along and, I could get information. I would not be, I would favor an amendment to remove that at this time and add it back in should we need to. And so I will leave it to your discretion on whether you'd like to continue the conversation with the wording as is or offer an amendment to make a change before we move forward.
I would move to strike lines 52 to 55.
We have an amendment. I think Senator Blunt did an excellent job of describing his concerns for that portion of the bill. Is there further discussion on his amendment?
Move
Seeing none,
adoption.
Senator Blunt moves adoption of the amendment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And we'll make that change to the bill. So we're now back on the bill as explained. Is there any question on the bill as presented? Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my first chance to look at the bill, and I haven't really had an opportunity to digest sort of what we're trying to accomplish. I do have a question about some of the language in section 1, specifically that would require an expenditure in an amount exceeding $5 million, as I understand it, how it's been revised, or would impact.
What line are you on, Senator?
I'm on lines, starting line 32 to 34. Or would impact the administration of any election. That seems, as a lawyer, that seems very, very broad, whether or not something would impact the administration of an election. Is this language, again, something from the Secretary of State's office?
I don't know if we have anyone in the room from the Secretary of State's office. That's what we do. Is that Colby back there? Colby, do you mind approaching, and if you have the answer to that question, you can, do you mind coming up to a microphone if you can help Senator Thompson with that question? You can just have a seat right there next to Senator Hobson and we won't be too tough on you.
Yeah, so thank you, Senators. So the idea with that language was if there's any consent agreement against the Secretary of State in the future or a municipal body that would impact the administration of the election, it would require notification to the legislature and the governor. What we've seen in other states is accusations of lawsuits against election commissioners, Secretary of State's offices to circumvent legislative action that have been taken in previous sessions. And so we just wanted that notification to the legislature in that instance.
Okay. So it's more about if a lawsuit or an injunction is sought that would prevent or would prevent the Secretary of State or an election commissioner from performing their work, then that's what you're trying to, that's the effort.
An example we've seen in other states is if the legislature passes a law, say pertaining to voter ID or another provision administering an election, and there's a friendly lawsuit against the secretary or another election official, they could quickly consent to not enforce certain provisions of that law as a way to circumvent legislative action. So all this would do is trigger a notification to the legislature, not any action taken by the legislature.
You know,
And-
yeah, that's my next question.
There's no trigger for action taken by the legislature or the governor. It's simple notification on that form as prescribed by the Attorney General's office to the legislature and the governor. If the legislature and the governor were to choose not to take any action in response to that, there would be no problem with that.
Then the Secretary of State is free to
Right.
enter into that consent decree or whatever
Right,
resolution to the lawsuit.
there's specifically no approval required from the legislature.
Okay.
Just notification, because what we don't want to happen is if this is entered outside of session and the legislature's not made aware of it until they see it in the news or the next legislative session, when it may be too late to do something.
Okay.
In any case, it would be egregious enough action, notifying the legislature and the governor would open the door for a potential special election or any other action that wanted to be taken, step in that case.
So for example, the Fifth Circuit case that just came down, the best I can recall, affirming our voter ID requirements. That happened this past week or 2 weeks?
I believe so. I would
All that would
defer to the
happen
attorneys in our office, but I believe so.
when that lawsuit was filed, all that would happen is we would have to receive notice. Under this bill is the legislature would receive notice of that lawsuit.
Before, at least 30 days before our agency would enter any consent agreement or any judgment.
Understand? Okay. Maybe we could put some sort of defining language or some guardrails on what we mean by would affect the administration of an election.
And this is the kind of bill that I think is an additional education and thought bill, like we were talking before. I look forward to, more feedback should this bill move along, and we may have some adjustments and things that we need to make changes on. And that's why this committee is so important, because you put a lot of thought and bring a lot of questions that are extremely important that we consider, so I would be glad to continue to work with you on that, Senator Thompson.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Colby while we have him mic'd up? Thanks for the help, Colby. And we're back on questions on the bill. So again, in closing, what I would like to see happen is that there be accountability, that we continue to do the audits, that we give the auditor more power to do these audits. But we also require collaboration so that we don't have some of our regular citizens who don't have the benefit of this microphone put in situations where their lives can be changed forever for what they consider and what I consider to be a mistake. There are certain times where, any and all of us, we might do something or omit something on a form, and I would hope that if I omit something on a form and I paid that back, that the response of anybody looking at the circumstances would not be that I should be put in jail because I made a simple mistake. And if we're at the point where that is the policy of the state, is to immediately put someone in jail without knowing all the facts and all the information on the case, I would say it's a sad commentary on where we are as a state. And so, if there are not any further questions, is there a motion? I have a motion of title sufficient to pass as amended. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. We're going to jump back up on the agenda to Senate Bill 2574. This is regarding contracts. So with contracts with with government entities, there are certain contracts that require performance bond. This bill would increase the contract amount from 25 to 75,000 on lines 81 to 82 that require a performance bond. So what's happened is construction and other costs have gone up dramatically over the state. There are very few contracts that are under $25,000 at this time. So the contract would have to have a value of greater than $75,000 to require a performance bond. Any questions on the bill? Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the effort. I appreciate the effort. In my private practice, I do a fair amount of construction litigation. There are a lot of disputes about when a job is actually completed and in private and public contracts. My fear is, and that on jobs where there's a bond, the contractor behaves differently than on jobs where there's no bond. The bond is an extra cost for the contractor, but if the owner goes against the bond, that motivates the contractor to finish his work or to correct defective work, even after substantial completion's been issued. My concern is, particularly for our small counties and cities, that having that unbonded work out there could potentially cause them harm.
Would it surprise you that this request comes to me personally from the cities and the counties?
I could see that there are some cities and counties that have contractors telling them that they don't want to pay a bond premium. I could see all that. Yes, I could see for some that they may want to be freed up a little bit. But
So I think, what we have here is we have a balanced situation where we're trying to recognize the fact that costs have changed, but also recognize your point as well. I don't know what the number could be or should be, but I do feel like it needs to be higher than 25,000. So with that in mind, the bill as it stands, moving it to 75,000, do you feel that is too large a jump, or do you feel any jump at all is a problem for us?
no, I could see 50, 40. Something
I would
that-
consider that a friendly amendment if you would like to offer that.
Yes.
Again, the point of this is to get us to a point where we make a proper decision based on, what we've heard. And so, I'll open it to other questions and then come back for you for an amendment while you ponder that with colleagues. Any other questions?
Another
Senator
question,
Williams?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know when the 25,000 was originally implemented?
I can find that out. And
Working in this space and being subject to some of these things, there's a balance, and it's the sweet spot we're trying to find here, and I completely get it. Just, if that was implemented 5 years ago, then I'm leaning towards the 50,000. If that was implemented 30 years ago, there are a lot of smaller jobs, and today a $75,000 job is not necessarily a big job, and a bond can be an impediment for a smaller contractor to come in there as well. I think there's some other ancillary benefits. Again, there's a number we've got to find. I think we agree it should go up. Should it go up to 75? So it'd be good to know that information.
I agree. And I would prefer to try to make an adjustment in committee instead of coming up. So Senator Thompson, if you have a suggestion, as long as it's not $25,001, something,
No,
something a little higher would be, I would certainly like to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would be on lines 81 and 82 to increase the amount from 25 to $50,000.
Okay, you've heard the amendment. Are there questions on the amendment? Seeing none, Senator Thompson moves adoption of the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. Further questions on the bill? Seeing none, is there a motion? Title sufficient do pass as amended. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. We'll move on to Senate Bill 2575. This is another one of, I guess, my favorite topics for AET, along with Senator Blunt. But I'll say that I have talked to Senator Blunt ahead of this meeting, and we understand the situation here. This situation does come to us from the third-party receiver concerning Jackson Water. Let me say that I have been and continue to be encouraged by the work that Ted Hennepin, Carla, and his team have done for the city of Jackson. When I got to Jackson at the start of this session, saw some commercials on TV for Jackson Water, and I thought, well, where are those commercials coming from? Well, they're coming from Ted and his team. He has in the federal dollars a pot that allocates him some expense money for PR for the city. And I think you now see a little more confidence in that situation. And I certainly just personally in the home that we keep here have been very pleased with the changes on the water system. So if you left Jackson because we didn't have the proper water here, I will tell you, come back because the water is doing much better. And with that in mind, we do have a problem that Ted's brought to our attention. So at the current time, the federal receiver is helping prop up Jackson Water. The way that's happening is there is about $6 million a month in revenue coming in from water bills. There's about $9 million of expense going out on expenditures from water bills. What the federal decree has been doing is allowed him to pay the delta, been paying the approximately $3 million in between. Of the nearly $1 billion that he has on hand, there are certain buckets in there that he can get to and certain buckets that he cannot. The bucket that has allowed him to pay the delta of $3 million a month is running dry. And this simple change to the language would allow him to access a bucket that will allow him to continue to pay this $3 million going forward. I'll also comment that one of the concerns I had was that last year, the EPA came back with a ruling that said of the $450 million bucket that Ted is overseeing, none of it could be used to retire debt. I've had conversations with colleagues, including Senator Blunt and others, and Senator Horn in particular, and I would like to see us maybe make sometime this year a move or a request to the new EPA administration to reconsider that ruling. Because if we can decrease the ongoing bonded debt indebtedness of the city water, it's another way to curtail cost going forward. So again, what this bill simply does is on lines, one little simple change repeated 2 times in the bill, on lines 47 and 48, it adds after the word or association, it adds or for-profit entity formed solely for the purpose of complying with federal and state order. And again, this language comes directly to me from third-party receiver. This is not political. This is, in my mind, it's not controversial. This is good for the city, and I would hope and have asked for the support of the Jackson delegation, and will continue to do that should this bill move forward. So, are there questions on the bill? Senator Blunt.
If there are no questions, I would like to make a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. You're recognized.
I do appreciate you, as you said, coming to see me about this, and I want to be real clear. This bill makes no change to the governance of the Jackson water system today or in the future. This bill does exactly what Chairman Parker described. It simply treats the folks who are running the Jackson water system right now like a nonprofit, the way nonprofits are already treated, and allows them to access tax-exempt capital markets, which they cannot access under the current law. That's what the bill does, and that's a good thing for Jackson. The governance of the water system is not addressed in this bill. What happens next is not in this bill. This is something that is needed now to simply treat Jackson Water like the same way we treat nonprofit water systems, so they can access tax-exempt capital markets to continue to run the water system. That's all the bill does, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. And I would hope too that when this bill hopefully makes it to the floor, I would welcome any co-authors from the city of Jackson. Because of previous conversations, I think it would be good policy for the legislature to be moving together. You know, and as I've shared before, this is good for Jackson. So Senator Blunt makes a motion of title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? That bill will be reported. The next bill is Senate Bill 2578. This concerns cell phones. So basically what this bill does is it will exempt text messages from the requirements of the Mississippi Public Records Act unless the messages are related to business of the public body and for related purposes. There has been, I believe, an ethics ruling on this issue, or it could have been an AG's opinion. Somebody was going to get me that. So this is not new. This puts our code in compliance with what I think rulings already are. For the attorneys in here, you may already know the answer to this, but if there is a request for information, with the way we keep and collect text messages from friends and other people, I don't think it's necessarily the business of someone seeking information on a business matter to get the personal and private conversations you might have with a spouse or significant other along with that request. So it's a brief explanation of the bill. Yield for questions. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just at the proper time, I'd like to offer a technical amendment. It references SMS. There are actually 3 different formats that are commonly used just to make sure we encompass all those.
You're recognized.
I need to make an amendment that after line 8, text or short message service, SMS, comma, MMS, and RCS, rich communication services on personal phones.
You hear the amendment, and I will state that if you have questions on the amendment, I'm not the person to ask.
We know a guy.
So do you move adoption of the amendment?
Adoption
Or no
of the
questions? Moves adoption of the amendment by Senator Williams. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? And that will be added. Is there any more discussion on the bill? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I make a motion, title sufficient to pass.
Senator Barrett moves title sufficient to pass as amended. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. Senate Bill 2582 is sets up a diversion study committee. You know, the information that's been presented to me is that, as we all know, and there's a lot of discussion about this session, you know, your tax dollars are collected locally. Those dollars are sent to the state. There's 18.5% diversion that goes back to the municipalities. There've been some municipalities that have contacted me and have realized that some of those collections within the city have not been making their way back to the city after they're sent to the state. What this would do is set up a study committee to kind of look and see if we do have a problem with that and see what, if any, remedy can be applied to us. So we'd just set up a committee, including Commissioner of Revenue, a senator, a House member, Chair of Finance, Chair of Ways and Means, Executive Director of the MML, State Director of the National Federation of Independent Businesses, Executive Director of MEC, representative of a municipality with a population over 50,000 and a representative with a population under 50,000 to look at this issue to see if we can put a dollar amount on this and if we can improve it. And certainly if we made a change in how we do this process as this session goes along, this bill may or may not need some modifications. But I would like to keep it alive and keep discussion going on this important issue for our cities. Any questions on the bill? Senator Blunt.
Just to if I may be recognized to speak briefly, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
I think this is a good bill because there are people in this building who want to raise the sales tax, who want to increase the cost of everything that you buy by raising your sales tax. And that only will exacerbate the problem that we have already in the state for municipalities that have lost much of their retail base, whether you're a big city or whether you're a small town. And that inequity, when you go, like where I live, if you drive to Ridgeland or Flowood to buy something because you can't buy a pair of shoes in Jackson anymore, or if you live in Terry and you can't buy a pair of shoes in Terry, you're driving to the same place, is the folks who want to raise the sales tax are going to make that inequity in the funding for cities even worse. And so even if the money is being collected and distributed correctly, I don't know, I think that's worth looking at. But this problem of how the money is allocated to municipalities and whether it's based on point of sale or not, and what that means for the vast majority of municipal residents who live in municipalities that don't have a Dick's Sporting Goods or a Walmart, who are losing out under the current system and who are going to lose more under the system that some folks want to raise their sales tax, is worth looking at. And it's real timely, and I'm glad you brought it before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. Any other questions on the bill? Seeing none, is there a motion? A motion of title sufficient do pass by Senator Barrett. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? And that bill will be reported. The next bill on our agenda is Senate Bill 2591. This is an issue that's brought to me by concerning laptops, tablets, and computer peripherals. So the problem, as I see and understand it right now, is that in our education system, we have devices that have a timeline and a time span. And what our education system does is they might buy computers or say an iPad or some device like that in bulk. And they know that at a certain amount of time, they're going to have to replace those items. So contracts are entered into where there's a purchase price, and then there's a surrender value that the device will have. And then there's a reallocation amount that's given towards the repurchase at that time. This has made this procurement a little bit cumbersome because sometimes the process of getting all of this done and moving on means that you may move to a device where you now have a new device. And I know I have bought an iPhone before, and then a few months later realized I should have waited because now there's a newer, faster one. So this will just allow this to happen better for education. So simply what it does is on lines 108 and 109, in education exemptions that we already have right now, it will add after the word starting on line 108, but I'll go up just a little above that. So the exemption right now is only when purchasing copyrighted educational supplement materials, but we will add, electronic devices such as laptops, tablets, and computer peripherals, where we have dialed this down and made sure that it's just for that purpose. So that's the explanation of the bill. Are there questions on the bill? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Make a motion, title sufficient, do pass.
Motion, title sufficient, do pass. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? And that bill will be reported. Next bill is Senator McMahon's bill, Senate Bill 2830. This bill, much like the bill we took up earlier, increases the public bid requirement threshold from $5,000 to $15,000. Just like I explained before, on these expenditures, prices have gone up, and this would just bring this more in line with what we're seeing in today's marketplace. I think we had a good discussion on this before. Senator Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said increase the bid requirements, and I don't have the bill right in front of me, but wouldn't that just be the getting two quotes going from 5 to 15?
Yeah, so if you look at lines 13 through 15, the bidding procedure for purchase is not over $15,000. you can make the expenditure more easily on an item below 15,000. Current language is 5,000.
Right.
So it's just changing it, and you may have a lot more familiarity with this statute. This is certainly not my expertise. And as before, I welcomed the input from Senator Thompson when we were moving the dollar amount here.
I think I know what's going on. I just, something you said kind of triggered me to ask the question about whether we're doing actually the full bidding process or just getting competitive quotes on it. And I think that's what it is. But I do think it needs to go up again. Where the sweet spot is, as we discussed in the previous bill.
Right.
I would have probably said 10, but I'm not, 15 doesn't give me great,
Yeah.
pause or disturbance.
Right.
So I'll go with the chair if he thinks 15 is appropriate.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm not sure where the sweet spot is, but 15 does not sound in today's market like a exorbitant amount. So, but we'll continue to look and talk about it. I certainly would be welcome to a change if necessary. Further questions on the bill? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass.
A motion, title sufficient, do pass. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we've got just one more bill that we're going to cover here. The next bill is Senate Bill 2832. This comes to us from Senator Rhodes. Every year there's a lot of discussion on notices and printing in newspapers and that kind of thing. There have been several bills introduced on this. Senator Blackwell has introduced a bill for many years. There's significant opposition to Senator Blackwell's bill from local newspapers and other smaller entities. What Senator Rhodes' bill does, though, is it limits this. So I'll just read the title here. Simplifies the notice publication process for counties by allowing online publication as an alternative to newspaper publication in counties where there are no, as in zero, newspaper published or located within the county and for related purposes. So the purpose of this is to get the information to people by publication. And if within a county there's no publication to get the information there, I think it sounds reasonable that we could select an alternative. It may also be prudent at some point to move that or expand this, to areas where circulation is limited or is not reaching people as well. But I just wanted to kind of get this out of the barn, so to speak, and just see, if we could get some discussion and movement on this in a situation where there's no newspaper present. So questions? Senator Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question, because I think I may represent a county that doesn't have a website that would be able to do that. I don't know. I'll check on that, but that would certainly be a problem. They do utilize the newspaper in a neighboring county. That's the normal process for them.
And it does in the language leave it as an option, not a
It-
requirement.
It does. It's an option to
It is an
continue
option.
with the newspaper publication.
Right, they could continue, I believe correct me if I'm incorrect, Allison. But the Board of Supervisors shall be authorized to publish such resolution on the official website. It doesn't prohibit them from continuing their current process of doing business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Further questions on the bill? Is there a motion? A motion from Senator Williams of title sufficient do pass. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, the last bill, I apologize. I was not able to get with some representatives who requested a meeting with me on this one. So I'm going to leave this on the calendar. We are scheduled to meet again next Tuesday. You can guess the time. Yeah, but I appreciate your indulgence today. Is there a motion?